I always thought I had it all figured out. I had my job, my friends, a routine. And the one thing I thought I'd never question was Sarah. She was my constant, my rock. But here's the thing, sometimes, the people closest to us, the ones we love the most, can feel like they're slipping through our fingers without us even realizing it. I'd spent so many years with Sarah, my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. We built this life together. But then, there was this moment, one that hit me out of nowhere, that made me question everything. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't an explosion. It was more like a whisper, slowly growing louder and louder until I couldn't ignore it anymore. And that's when I realized I wasn't the man she needed anymore. And letting go was the hardest, yet the most important thing I could do for both of us. I've always been a practical guy. Life, to me, was about finding stability, building something solid, and enjoying the comfort of routine. There's a kind of peace in knowing what to expect, in having a life that feels secure. You wake up, go to work, have dinner, relax, repeat. And sure, it wasn't flashy, but it was safe. Safe for me, safe for Sarah. And maybe that was the problem. I thought our life together was perfect, comfortable, predictable, and steady. We had a home, we had our careers, and we had each other. What else could anyone need? We built a life that worked for us, one that allowed us both to feel like we were part of something, without the constant turbulence of uncertainty. And maybe that's where I was wrong. I was so content in my belief that everything was fine, everything was good enough, that I hadn't realized it wasn't enough for Sarah. The first time I really saw the difference between us, was when she started talking about her dreams. It wasn't that she didn't have them before. She'd always mentioned wanting more. But lately it had become more pronounced. The subtle mentions of traveling the world, taking risks, working on projects that could make a real difference, running her own business, those weren't just passing thoughts anymore. They were ideas that consumed her. I remember sitting with her one evening, her eyes lit up with that spark of excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. We were having a quiet dinner at home, but the conversation drifted to a project she had been planning for months. Something she'd been talking about in passing for years but now was seriously considering. She wanted to take a risk, quit her job, travel for a while, and build a creative business around her passion. I could hear the excitement in her voice, the urgency in the way she spoke. "This is something I need to do, James," she said. "I've been thinking about it for a while, and I feel like I'm wasting time. I need to take the leap." At that moment I froze. It was like a part of me clicked, and I realized that this wasn't just some casual daydream anymore. This was her future, and it wasn't one that fit into the life we built together. The life I had built around my own need for security. And that's when the crack in our relationship began to widen. You see, I didn't share those dreams. Or maybe it was more accurate to say I couldn't share them. I didn't want to quit my job, take risks, or throw everything we had built into the wind. The thought of uprooting our life, of stepping away from the security we had, terrified me. I liked our life the way it was. I liked the comfort of knowing that we had everything we needed. I liked knowing that Sarah was beside me, that we had a solid foundation, that we were going in the same direction. But the truth was, that foundation was built on the assumption that we wanted the same things. And I'm not sure we did anymore. I couldn't understand why she wanted more. Didn't she realize how good we had it? I mean, we had everything anyone could ask for. We had our routines, we had our friends, we had our little hobbies that made us happy. We went on trips, we spent quiet evenings together, we enjoyed each other's company. What more could there possibly be? But she didn't see it that way. To Sarah, the comfortable life, the one I had built for us, was a cage. And I hadn't realized that she felt trapped inside it. I started to think back to when we first met. Sarah was always the dreamer, the one who believed in the impossible, the one who wanted to change the world in her own way. She was passionate, fearless, and full of ideas. When I first fell in love with her, I was drawn to that energy. But somewhere along the way, that spark had dimmed. The reality of life, the grind, the day-to-day responsibilities, the need to make ends meet, had swallowed her up. And maybe I had too. I had become so focused on creating a stable life for us that I didn't see how much she was losing in the process. I began to feel like I was holding her back, even though I had never meant to. I had always thought of our life as something to be cherished, a safe haven where we didn't have to worry about the unknown. But she had started to outgrow that safety net. She was ready to break free and take chances, to go after the things she really wanted, things that didn't fit neatly into the life I had planned for us. And I couldn't blame her for that. The truth was, she was looking at the future with a hunger I no longer shared. I started to feel a sense of dread creep in. I had always thought our comfort was enough to keep us grounded, but Sarah didn't just want to survive, she wanted to live. She wanted adventure, passion, and change. She wanted to see the world, try new things, and build something that mattered. And all I could think about was the stability we had. The life that I had worked so hard to create, a life where we didn't have to take risks, where we didn't have to question the future. But Sarah was questioning it. She was questioning everything. I had this deep sense of unease. It wasn't that I didn't love her. It wasn't that I didn't want her to be happy. I did. But in my heart, I couldn't escape the feeling that we were no longer on the same path. She wanted to grow, but I was afraid of what that growth might look like. I was afraid of change, afraid of losing the comfort I had worked so hard for. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how stuck I was, stuck in my own belief that comfort was enough. But here's the thing, comfort doesn't change you. Comfort doesn't challenge you. Comfort doesn't make you feel alive. And as much as I wanted to deny it, Sarah had always been someone who needed to feel alive. She needed the unknown, the excitement of pursuing something bigger than herself. And that was something I couldn't offer her anymore. The life I had built for us, this comfortable, predictable life, wasn't the dream she had in her heart. And it wasn't the dream I had either. But I was too afraid to admit it. I could feel it in the way she looked at me sometimes. Like I was safe, but not the person she needed anymore. And in those moments, I wondered if she was looking at me with disappointment, not because I was a bad guy, but because I was holding her back. Because she had grown in ways I hadn't. She had dreams that weren't tied to a steady paycheck, a nice house, and a quiet life. She had bigger things in mind. I was scared. I was scared to lose her, but I was even more terrified of realizing that I wasn't enough for her anymore. That the comfortable life I had created, the life I had wanted us to have, was not the life she dreamed of, and deep down, I knew it. I knew that the life we had built, the one that was so easy for me to settle into, was the very thing that was starting to pull us apart. And I had to face the truth. Sarah wasn't going to stay in my bubble of comfort forever. Not when she had the whole world waiting for her. Not when she could feel the spark of something bigger calling her name. At first, I laughed it off. More than this? What do you mean? She paused for a moment, chewing on her lip, then shrugged. I don't know. I just feel like we've been in this routine for a while. I wonder if we're living the life we were meant to live, or if we're just drifting. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. I tried to brush it off, tried to reassure her that we had a good life. But the words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. We had a life, sure. A comfortable life. But something about the way she asked it, the way she sounded, like she was searching for something she hadn't quite found yet, made me pause. And that was when the first seed of doubt was planted. It was so small, so seemingly insignificant at the time, but it started to take root. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about what she said. Are we meant for more than this? Was she unhappy? Had I missed something? Was I so wrapped up in my own routine, my own comfort, that I hadn't noticed how dissatisfied she was with our life? I started to notice little things that, in hindsight, should have been obvious. She started spending more time at work, staying later, attending extra meetings, as though there was something more exciting there. Or maybe someone. Her phone buzzed constantly, and while she didn't try to hide it, I noticed how often she'd glance at it with a faint smile. Then quickly shove it away when I looked her way. I caught a glimpse of a name and a message once, Ryan, and my stomach twisted. I didn't have any reason to believe there was anything wrong, but that name gnawed at me. I didn't know a Ryan. She didn't talk about any Ryan. And that's when the insecurities really started creeping in. Was she interested in someone else? It's hard to admit, but I started to let my mind wander to places I knew I shouldn't go. Maybe she wasn't as happy as I thought she was. Maybe she didn't see a future with me anymore. What if she was getting bored? What if someone else had caught her eye? I started second-guessing everything. Every look she gave me, every word she said, every small change in her behavior became a clue, a sign that something was off. I started questioning her intentions, her commitment, and my own role in our relationship. I wondered, did she still love me the way she used to? And then came the moments of silence, the long stretches of time where we would sit next to each other. But the air felt heavy, like we were both thinking things we weren't willing to share. I'd try to make conversation, but she'd respond with one-word answers or nods, like her mind was elsewhere. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard not to notice the change. I'd ask her, "Are you okay? You seem distant lately," and she'd wave it off, saying she was just tired or had a lot on her mind. But I knew that wasn't it. It wasn't just tired. It was something more. And as much as I tried to brush it off, there was a part of me that couldn't help but wonder if I had missed some warning sign. Had she been trying to tell me something for months, and I had ignored it? Had I been so focused on my own fears, my own insecurities, that I hadn't noticed how she was changing? I started asking myself questions I didn't want the answers to. What if I wasn't enough for her anymore? What if I was just settling because it was easier than confronting the possibility of losing everything I had? I didn't want to admit it to myself, but a fear started to grow. What if she was already planning her exit? One evening, I asked her if everything was okay. "You've been distant lately," I said, trying to be casual about it. She looked at me, and I saw the hesitation in her eyes. For a second, I thought she might say something that would finally reveal what was going on inside her head. But instead, she shook it off. "I'm just going through some stuff," she said, her voice soft but distant. "It's nothing to worry about," but I couldn't let it go. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And the more I tried to push it out of my mind, the more it nagged at me. Every conversation felt like an interrogation, every silence felt like a test. It was like I was walking on eggshells, terrified that if I said the wrong thing, I'd trigger something irreversible. I started to wonder if we were too different. If we had changed so much that we were no longer compatible. I began to fear that what we had once shared, this deep connection, was slipping through my fingers, and I had no control over it. And the hardest part was that I didn't know how to fix it. At night, lying awake in bed, I'd replay every interaction, every moment we had shared in the past few months. I asked myself, where did we go wrong? What did I miss? But the answers weren't there. They never were. All I had were doubts. And that growing fear that the life we had built together was no longer enough for her, or for me. By the time I reached that point, the moment I knew I had to let her go, it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss. The decision to end things wasn't sudden, nor was it easy. It had been building for weeks, months even, but I had tried to bury it, to push it down into some dark corner of my mind, hoping it would disappear. Because let's be honest, who really wants to end a relationship? Especially when it's with someone you've shared your life with for years. Someone who knows you inside and out. Someone you promised a future to. The more Sarah talked about her dreams, the more I felt that chasm growing between us. It wasn't a loud, dramatic breakup that hit me like a tidal wave. It was a slow, suffocating realization, something quiet, creeping up on me until I couldn't deny it anymore. Her words echoed in my head, "I need something more," and I couldn't help but feel like I had failed her, like I had been failing her for a while. I remember one night, we were sitting in the living room after dinner, both of us tired from our workdays. There was a moment, just a brief flicker of time, where I looked over at her and realized that the woman I was sitting next to wasn't the same person I had fallen in love with. She had changed. And so had I. We both evolved, but in different directions. I could see it in the way she spoke about her plans. Her passion for the life she envisioned was so real, so alive, that it was impossible to ignore. But I also saw how she had started to pull away from me. It wasn't something she did intentionally, but I felt it. I felt the distance, the disconnection, the emptiness between us when we weren't laughing or talking about shared memories. The space between us had grown, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fill it anymore. I couldn't fix it. It hit me like a punch in the stomach. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't something I could ignore. We weren't the same people anymore. I kept thinking, is this the life I want? Is this the woman I want to build a future with? Or is this something I'm holding on to out of fear? That was the hardest part, the fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing the woman who had been my world for so long. What happens to me when she's gone? What if I never find someone like her again? I had built my life around her. She was my best friend, my confidant, my partner in crime. Could I really let her go? But what terrified me more than the thought of losing her was the realization that I was already losing her. We were already drifting apart, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on to the threads of our relationship, I couldn't deny that I wasn't the man she needed anymore. I couldn't be that person for her. I wasn't the one who could help her chase her dreams, and I certainly wasn't the person who could light up her world the way she deserved. I remember the night it really hit me. We had just come back from a small getaway, a trip that was supposed to bring us closer. It was supposed to remind us of the good times, the fun times, the moments when we felt invincible together. But the trip did the opposite. It highlighted everything that had been slowly fraying at the edges of our relationship. We were sitting on the couch, both of us looking out the window, the silence between us thick and heavy. The words I had been avoiding bubbled up to the surface, and suddenly I couldn't hold them back. It was like an emotional dam had broken inside me. "Sarah, I think we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking despite myself. She looked over at me, concern in her eyes. "What's wrong, James?" I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. I wanted to say something that would make everything okay. I wanted to make her understand that this wasn't what I wanted. But in my heart, I knew that the words I had to say would change everything. I think we need to break up," I finally forced out. The words felt like a slap to the face, even though I knew they had been coming. There was a moment of stunned silence, like time had stopped. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, and my mind was screaming at me, "No, don't say it. Don't let go. This isn't what you want." But it was already too late. The moment had arrived. The truth was out. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she didn't speak. I saw the hurt flash across her face, and I knew this was it. This was the moment where everything would change. The moment that I had feared, the moment I had been avoiding for so long. "Why, James?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why now? Why like this?" I didn't have a good answer for her. The truth was, I didn't fully understand why I was doing it. All I knew was that, in my heart, I had come to the painful realization that I wasn't the man she needed anymore. And in order to let her live the life she was meant for, I had to let go. "I don't know," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I'm not the one you need. I'm holding you back. You deserve more, Sarah. You deserve someone who can give you everything you want, someone who can chase those dreams with you." Her face fell, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. That image will haunt me forever. It wasn't anger that I saw in her expression, it was heartbreak. It was disappointment. It was the painful realization that the person she thought she could build her future with had let go of her just when she needed him the most. I wanted to take it all back. I wanted to tell her that I had been wrong, that I was scared, that I had been too afraid to risk losing everything we had. I wanted to tell her that I could change, that I would be the man she needed if only she would give me another chance. But I knew that wasn't true. I knew that deep down, it wasn't just about me being afraid. It was about us not being who we needed to be for each other anymore. That night, after she left, I sat in the living room, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like an anchor. I stared at the empty space where she had been sitting, where we had been together. And I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. In my heart, I knew I had made the right choice. But in my soul, it didn't feel right at all. I had let her go because I loved her. But love, true love, sometimes means letting go, even when it hurts more than anything in the world. Sometimes, the most painful decision is the only one that sets both people free. And I didn't know it then, but I had just begun a journey that would change my life forever. The weeks after the breakup were a blur. It felt like I was walking through life in a fog, everything dull and muted, like the world had lost its color. I kept telling myself that I had done the right thing, that letting Sarah go was the kindest, most selfless decision I could make for her. She deserved more, right? More than I could offer, more than the comfortable life we had built together. But deep down, every time I laid my head on the pillow at night, I questioned myself. I asked myself the same question over and over. Did I do the right thing? The guilt gnawed at me, slowly eating away at the quiet certainty I'd once had. I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she sounded when she said, "I don't know, James. I think I need something more." And I felt like the biggest failure in the world. Wasn't I supposed to be the one who could give her that more? Wasn't I supposed to be the guy who could provide her with a life that felt alive and not just safe? I missed her in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just the companionship or the laughter we shared. It wasn't even the physical moments, the way her touch could soothe me or the sound of her voice saying my name. It was the sense of knowing her, of feeling like there was a partner who understood me in ways that no one else could. And now I felt lost. Alone. Like I was walking through the motions of my life, but nothing felt the same. I began questioning everything. Had I ruined everything by doing the right thing? I kept thinking back to the arguments we'd had, the times she'd asked for more. I remember one conversation in particular, where she told me, "I'm tired, James. I'm tired of living in the shadow of what you're willing to give me." I had brushed it off, told myself it was just a phase. But now I couldn't help but wonder if that was the moment she started to see me differently. Every time I saw a couple together, laughing and enjoying each other, I felt a pang in my chest. I'd see happy couples, carefree, and I'd wonder, why couldn't we be like that? What did I do wrong? What had I missed? And then there were the nights when I was all alone, staring at the empty space next to me in bed. Those moments were the hardest, because in the stillness, the doubts became louder. What if she had been the one? What if I had been so wrapped up in my own fear, my own insecurities, that I let the love of my life slip through my fingers? I felt paralyzed by the idea that I had missed my chance. And then the guilt would spiral. Did she hate me now? Did she resent me for making her feel like she wasn't enough? Was she out there, living her life, thinking I never really loved her? I started to look back at our relationship with a different lens. I saw all the things I hadn't noticed before, the subtle hints, the times when she'd been unhappy but never quite voiced it, the moments when she'd pulled away and I had ignored it. Maybe, just maybe, if I had been more aware, more willing to meet her where she was, I wouldn't have had to make that painful choice to let her go. Maybe if I had just listened more, I could have been the partner she needed. But of course, I couldn't go back. I could only live with the choices I'd made, and I realized that the only thing I could do now was learn from them. But the hardest part wasn't just the guilt. It wasn't just wondering if I had done the right thing. It was the silence that stretched between us. That final moment when I realized that, no matter what, I might never have the answer to whether I'd been right or wrong. That was the hardest pill to swallow, that sometimes, even the hardest decisions don't have a clear answer. And in the silence, I began to understand something else, something that I wasn't ready to admit before. I missed her. But I had also missed myself. In trying to protect my comfort, I had lost sight of who I was outside of her. And that's what I had to face now, the idea that I wasn't just losing Sarah. I was losing the me that I had been before all of this. The me who had been willing to take risks, to change, to grow. But it wasn't too late. I had to believe that. Because the only way to rebuild, whether with her or without her, was to first rebuild me. Then, one day, I got a message. It was from Sarah. I almost couldn't believe it when I saw her name on my phone. "Can we meet?" the text said. It was short, simple. But it was enough to make my heart race. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me thought it was just a chance for closure, for her to finally move on, and for me to accept the truth. But another part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. I agreed to meet her. And when I saw her again, everything changed. When I saw Sarah again, it was like meeting a different person. She looked the same on the surface, beautiful, with that spark in her eyes that had always drawn me in, but there was something else. She was different in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. More confident. More alive. It was clear that she had been on a journey, one that didn't include me, but had somehow led her back to this moment, back to me. She looked at me, and I saw that same familiar warmth, but it was tempered with something new, a strength, maybe, or a clarity. She wasn't the girl I had left behind. She was someone who had grown, someone who had learned how to live without the safety net I had provided. I won't lie, I was scared. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I had done the right thing, that I had let her go for her own good. But seeing her now, I wondered if I had missed something. Had I really let go of her, or had I let go of us? We sat down, and she told me everything. She talked about the trips she'd taken, the people she'd met, the new opportunities that had come her way. She'd found herself in places I could never have imagined. But here's the thing, she wasn't just talking about what she had done. She was talking about who she had become, and it hit me, she wasn't running away from me. She wasn't running away from our life. She was running toward herself. She was building something, and I had been too blind to see it. She told me that she hadn't come back to me because she missed what we had. She hadn't come back because she needed someone to hold her hand through the next stage of her life. She came back because she was ready to build something new with me. Something that could only happen if we both grew, if we both changed. And in that moment, I realized something. I had been holding on to the past, thinking that it was the only way we could be happy. But Sarah's growth, her change, had shown me that love isn't about holding on to what's comfortable. It's about growing together. It's about allowing each other to be who you really are, not who you were when you first met. And when I looked at her, I realized that this wasn't about fixing something broken. It was about creating something new, a new version of us, one that wasn't bound by fear or insecurity, but by the love we had for each other and the people we had become. We took our time. We didn't rush into anything. We talked about everything, our hopes, our dreams, our fears. I asked her, "What do you want now, Sarah? What's next for you?" And she looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I really saw her, like I understood who she was now, not who I thought she should be. She told me she still wanted the world. She still wanted adventure. She still wanted to explore. But she didn't want to do it alone anymore. She wanted to do it with me. And for me, it wasn't just about being with her. It was about the journey we could share together. Two people who had learned the hard way that love isn't about holding on to the past. It's about building a future together. We started talking about our next steps, where we'd go, what we'd do, how we could create the life we both wanted. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every day, I felt myself growing alongside her, learning more about what it meant to love someone, to truly love someone. To let them go and come back, not because they needed you, but because they wanted you. We decided to take a trip together, a real adventure, the kind she'd always dreamed about. We went to places we had talked about so many times, places that had always felt out of reach. And I realized something. This wasn't just a trip. It was a journey to discover who we were together, and who we could become, and we came back changed. We didn't come back with all the answers, but we came back knowing one thing: we were stronger, more connected, more in tune with who we were now, and what we could be together. So, what did I learn from all of this? It's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Love isn't about comfort. It isn't about staying the same, about holding on to what you've built, just because it's familiar. Love isn't about clinging to the past. It's about growth. It's about embracing change, even when it scares you, even when it hurts. And sometimes you have to let go of the person you love to allow them the space to become who they were always meant to be. Because only then can you come back together, stronger, and more in tune with each other's true selves. When I let Sarah go, I thought I was losing her forever. But in reality, I was setting both of us free. And I never would have believed that until I saw her again. Until I saw that her dreams didn't need to be my dreams. And that my dreams didn't need to be hers. But the beauty of it is, we found a way to make them our dreams, together. And that's the kind of love that lasts. The kind of love that pushes you to grow, to change, to become the best version of yourself. The kind of love that challenges you to take risks, to step into the unknown, and to trust that when you do, you'll find each other on the other side. I guess that's the real moral of the story. Sometimes, the hardest decisions, the ones that break your heart, are the ones that end up leading you exactly where you need to be. And maybe that's the most beautiful thing of all.